Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to have another edition of What is Your Story with the beautiful Krista Rizzo, who I met maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, and we instantly connected. She is real AF, just like me, and she's gritty like me. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And what impressed me is she is looking to change the way we discuss and move through grief, whatever that looks like, right? It doesn't have to be grief for somebody who's passed on. It can be grief of losing a job or your child going to school, which we were talking about offline. So I'm really excited for you guys all to learn about Krista, the great work she's doing. And if you need support, know that you have a resource out there who can really help you navigate grief. So thank you so much for being here, Krista.
Thank you for having me.
Yay!
I'm very
This is
excited to be here. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I love it. So I guess, for me, I'm always interested in how'd you get involved in supporting people with grief? Like that's a heavy,
Yeah.
heavy topic.
Yeah. So I am a certified life coach and I now am a certified grief educator. Just based on the trajectory of how my life coaching career was going.
Yeah.
I started out life coaching over 10 years ago, lots of different niches and things that I've explored, relationships, parenting, all the stuff. And during COVID, I had been doing a lot of corporate speaking and like keynoting and facilitating of just, conversations. During COVID, everything went virtual. And, now we had this global pandemic that every single person on the planet is being affected by. And I'm having conversations with my corporate clients about staying positive, building resilience, overcoming burnout because everybody was so high anxiety and stressed out.
Yeah.
Also, grieving. And at the beginning, we didn't really talk about it that much, but as my conversations, expanded and went longer, because it was, several years that I was doing all that stuff, I started to kind of tap into what's actually going on in your life. And people would be like, well, I'm angry that I had to miss my son had to miss their graduation, or I'm angry that I couldn't go to my cousin's wedding, or a loved one of mine just died and I couldn't go to the funeral. And like all the stuff was starting to come up. Somebody lost their job, right, because of COVID and their business closed down. Like there's so many things that were affecting people's lives that they didn't realize they needed to address, right? We are very quick to associate grief with death, and rightfully so, right? But we are not very quick to associate grief with any other hardship that happens in our life.
Absolutely.
And so as I was going through these conversations with people, I also was going through my mother passing away, my brother passing away. We made the decision to leave our apartment in New York City and relocate to our home in Connecticut for a better quality of life for my kids and schools and stuff. And it just started to like weigh on me. And I was like, I need to be talking to people about this, but I also need to be better educated about it, right? I don't want to, like, I can walk in and talk about my experience all day long, but I want to have more tools in my toolkit. So I went and got a certification in grief education and grief treatment. And those conversations have, I think, been helpful for so many people because they don't recognize or even, want to acknowledge that I'm grieving. I might be grieving a breakup. I might be grieving my kid going to college. I might be grieving, a pet loss. There's so many things that we grieve on a regular basis that really does deserve its own experience and its own process. So that's kind of how I got to where I am.
Yeah. And I love that you said that because I think that's the reality, particularly in America, but I'm sure globally it's, okay, so this happened. Let's just keep it moving, keep it moving. But we're never allowing ourselves to actually feel or experience the underlying energy and the emotions that come up with whatever situation we're faced with. And so then to your point, we're then faced with burnout, overwhelm, depression, anxiety, because we haven't allowed ourselves the time needed to feel the feelings and just process what we've been through. And it doesn't have to be this huge thing. I think for me personally, I've learned that you can move through grief fairly
Yeah.
quickly once you understand the need to do so and know the process that works for you to then move through that. But I think because there's such miseducation and lack of education out there, people just think it's this huge, hard, scary thing that you have to face. And so they kind of just, like anything else, they just kind of sweep it under the rug and keep moving. So how
Yeah.
do you start to break that down, that habit, that belief that it could potentially be this really hard thing to face?
Yeah. I think when I was going through the whole education process, I was like, you know what? I want, because like you said, people don't want to face it because it's hard and it's uncomfortable and it's sad and it's overwhelming. I
Yeah.
wanted to turn that into a different experience for them because, there are tons of grief books out there in the marketplace and they're all, 200 pages and they're a lot of times heavy. And there's stuff out there that's not. I wanted to create something that felt a little bit more comfortable for people to explore on their own, right? I didn't
Yeah.
want to have to make like, you come to my class, but you have to be here every Tuesday at 12, right? So I wrote a very short ebook called You Can't Tell Me How to Feel, which was inspired by my now 18-year-old college student when he was 3.
Love
But
him.
it's super short. It's an ebook, it's 35 pages cover to cover, and it just explains the process. It explains how you can navigate it in your own terms on your own time. And I call it, I created this acronym called AVA, and it's acknowledge, validate, act. And
Mhm.
so again, like you mentioned it before, a lot of people like to avoid the grief. We don't want to have to deal with it. I am an avoider. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. I don't want to, jump into it. Somebody once said to me when I was going through it, the only way out is through. You can't
Yes.
go around, you can't dig under, you can't jump over it. You have to go through it. So when I started thinking about this, I was like, you know what? I think it's important for people to know that they have to acknowledge that this is happening to them,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yep.
it has happened to them in the past, right?
It's the
I
same as
went through this.
awareness. Yeah, the
Yeah.
same as, like, in addiction recovery, being aware, "Okay, I have a
Yes.
problem." Yeah.
Yes. Right. So you acknowledge that you have that experience. This is part of you. And then you have to validate the feelings that come with that experience, right? Validating the anger and the guilt and the depression and the sadness and the joy sometimes because
Yeah,
we're feeling all the feelings, right? And then
yeah,
you act on it. And acting on it can be something as simple as getting out of bed, right? It can be something as brushing your teeth and washing your face if you are feeling that kind of heaviness. It could
yeah.
be, you know what? I get outside and go for a walk with the dog. I need to meditate a little bit. I need to maybe connect with a friend and have a cup of coffee. Like it's different for everyone. There is no cookie cutter remedy for moving through grief.
I just love you so much
Well,
because because you highlight everything that I live and breathe for. So,
yeah,
one is you gotta feel the feels, whatever it
yeah,
is, you just have to feel the feelings, and I think, something that I wanna highlight, and I'm sure that you experience too when you're working with people or having conversations, because you do have corporate conversations and speak a lot about this, is that if a lot of people judge their emotional experience as, well, this situation doesn't warrant
yes,
this amount of emotion. And I'm like, you can't do that. Number one, if you've never been taught to feel your feelings, not only are you feeling the feelings over the loss of your job, but yet now you're feeling the feelings over every single thing that you've ever experienced that you suppressed. But
yep,
then, secondly, if you're judging these feelings, having joy while your mother is dying, or feeling rage that your significant other overdosed and passed
right,
away, whatever it is, if you judge them, you're not actually healing from them. You're sitting in the shit, so to speak, and you're not actually moving forward. So I love that. And then secondly, what I just oh, guys, you need to hear this, and you need to reach out to her if this resonates with you, is there is no cookie cutter way to heal. Same as there's no cookie cutter way to move through addiction. We can provide a framework. We can give tools and strategies and a baseline for what that needs to, look like. But at the end of the day, it's so individual. And so I love that you recognize that and honor
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
because that truly is how we heal.
100%. And like you said, I've been saying this for years. It's like comparing your grief experience is never going to get you anywhere,
Never.
right? Like the loss of a pet is definitely different than the loss of a child, right? The loss of a job is different than the loss of a relationship. The loss of a marriage is different than the loss of a loved one, right? It doesn't make it less significant. It just
Yes.
makes it different. And
Thank
when we recognize that pet loss or that relationship loss or that what seems more insignificant than the death loss, when we recognize it as its own specific and separate entity, that's when we kind of have the freedom to explore, oh, well, this works for me in this kind of case, and this works for me in this kind of case. And it could be two different processes.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the same. It doesn't matter. And
Sure.
and interestingly enough, you said freedom to explore. And I remember yesterday having a conversation with a good friend of mine. And I shared with that person, I was like, when you assume that you actually close yourself off
Right.
from really getting into the work, because you have to be curious. You have to just be like, okay,
Yeah.
I don't know what it's gonna be like to walk through this path of grief, but I'm going to be brave enough to do it. And I think that's really profound and super important. Similar to what I tell people with trauma, right? Just because my trauma looks different than your trauma doesn't mean that it didn't have an emotional impact that inhibited my ability to live well,
Right.
right? It doesn't matter. And when we can stop judging and comparing and just go through our own work, we really experience freedom. I'm curious. So, how, because I know I run into this issue with my clients around addiction, but how do you start to hold space for people to get them to the place where they give themselves permission to be curious? Because I find that so many people are so stuck in habits and beliefs and behaviors that even getting them to get curious, there's work in it. So what is your strategy when working with people to get them to open up a little bit and not be so rigid in their thinking?
So I like to start the conversations, and I like to work a little bit backwards in this. There was a part of my experience where, people don't like to necessarily talk about grief, right? And especially with other people, right? They might not feel like they understand it, or they might feel like they're being a burden to have this conversation with them because they don't want to make somebody else sad. And there's a whole cycle.
Yeah.
So for me, it's tell me the living story. Let's start with the
Mm,
living story. And then I get, what are you talking about, the living story? So if we're talking about a person passing, or the living story of the job that you lost, or whatever it is, what's the story behind this? Right? Now, I don't want to go back into the past of your childhood trauma like a therapist would, or if there's any of that lives there, but I want to know what that person was, or what that experience was like at joyful times, or what it was like even from day-to-day operations with that person or that experience. And then, once somebody starts talking about somebody they love, normally they want to do it, right? It's like,
mhm.
oh, I would happily tell you all about my sister or my mother or my brother or whatever. And then you start with okay, now let's talk about where you need to go next, and why
Yeah,
you're feeling so blocked, and let's talk about all your feelings. And I'm here as your support person to help validate those feelings, because a lot of times we feel like we are unworthy of those feelings, or we feel guilty about having those feelings, or whatever
absolutely.
is coming up for us, right? So I like to start with by telling the living story and encouraging other people to hear it,
Yeah.
right? Part of, I think, grief recovery is talking about your people, or talking about your experience, not hiding it, right? My kids, my dad died 7 years ago. My mom died 3 years ago. My brother died 2 years ago, right? It was very fast. And my
Yeah.
kids were still young when all of that happened, right? So we talk all the time about grandma and grandpa and Uncle Joe and all, because I want their lives to be remembered. But I also
Yeah.
want them to understand that the choices that they made, right? None of them were healthy people, right? They were, right? So the choices that they made kind of helped them move past, the earth much earlier than really they should have, right? So also having the uncomfortable conversations with the living people to help make better choices or make different choices or to open their eyes about how we can contribute to our own demise if we are, not aware and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So I think, starting with a living story is the answer to your question, but and that kind of cascades differently for each person.
Yeah, totally. Well, so speaking of your living story, so you
Yeah,
shared with the audience and myself that you've been doing coaching for, more than a decade and speaking. I'm curious, what is your story? How is it that you initially got into coaching? And I think more importantly, because the whole idea behind this show is making the people I interview very relatable to the person who needs your services.
sure.
So, on top of how you got into coaching, what's your own journey of healing look like,
Yeah,
because we all have them.
of course. So I have over 2 decades of corporate experience prior to coaching, right? I was in the corporate space for a long time, had a big job there, was with the same company through merger and acquisition for 16 years or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, the last 18 months of my tenure there were filled with toxic work environment. And so there was harassment happening, there was bullying happening, not just to me, but to other people in the office. And it got really, really stressful.
Yeah.
And I was at a point in my life where I was, I was 40 years old. I had 2 young kids. We lived in New York City. We had another house outside of the city. Like there was just a lot of stuff, right? There's schedules and kids, and we had to make money because we have to be able to maintain this lifestyle. And there was just all kinds of, and also I'm a woman. And if you are a
Mhm.
woman of a certain age, you were taught probably as you were growing up that you were responsible for all the things all the time, right? So don't bitch about stuff, just handle it.
Do it.
Right.
Yep.
And so I was handling it, except I wasn't handling it, right? It was
Yeah.
breaking me down. And it got to the point to where it was my 13th wedding anniversary and my husband came home from work and the two kids my kids are 6 years apart, right? So
Yeah.
they never really fight. We don't go, but they were wrestling on the ground. And I had just said, somebody is going to get hurt. And it was 7 o'clock at night. And we had gotten home about an hour earlier, me and the kids. My husband was coming in from work and I still wasn't out of my work clothes. I was unloading laundry. I was like, doing all the things. And now one kid's crying and the other one's saying it wasn't my fault. And my
Yep.
husband walks in with flowers for our anniversary. And I'm in the bedroom and I'm standing in the closet and I'm trying to put stuff away and I'm shaking my head. And he, unbeknownst to him, is thinking he's doing a really nice thing and comes in. He kisses me hello and says, we'd already said happy anniversary already that day, but he was like, happy anniversary. I just put your flowers on the table. And I lost it. Like
Yeah.
that was my breaking point. I don't know why. Like it wasn't a mean thing for him to say. It wasn't a terrible thing for him to say.
Yep.
It just put me over the edge and
It was
I
too much. Yeah.
exploded. I didn't like, yeah, I just melted and cried. And he was like, what is happening? And so I was like, this is what's happening at work. This is why I feel overwhelmed. I need help. I can't do it all. And he was like, hold on. Nobody expects you to do it all. So let's go back to the beginning. So we rehashed the whole stuff and he was like, great, this is what we're going to help you with. This is what you're not responsible for anymore. So he was like, you not well is not going to make anybody, like this family will not be well if you are not well. So let's make sure that you're well. So
Go
long,
hubby. Oh my
long
God. Can we
story short,
shout
yeah,
out the
yeah,
man?
yes, we can. Long story short, I ended up leaving the company. I was like,
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore. So I quit my job. I took a reorganization package and left. And while I was kind of trying to figure things out, I kind of fell into coaching through a career coach who said to me, you are missing what you're supposed to be doing and you
Yeah.
need to go into coaching. And she's like, I've never said this to anybody, any of my clients, like, this is what you need to be doing. And so I kind of leaned into it because here's how the universe works. I'm a 9/11 survivor. And after September 11th happened, we decided to stay in our apartment in the world. We lived 2 blocks south of the World Trade Center.
Wow.
So that's also part of my story. So I was getting my nails done about a year later, and I'm sitting in the pedicure chair and I'm reading the New York Times Magazine, and there's an article about Steven Tyler and his life coach. And I was mesmerized by the article. I was like, life coach. I'm literally I'm walking home, and I will never forget this. And I'm crossing the West Side Highway on the pedestrian bridge that had to be built because of the World Trade Center
Yep.
collapsing. And I said out loud to the universe, I think I want to be a life coach.
I love that.
And 12 years later, here I am
Yep.
exploring right now. So that's kind of, I know the universe works in mysterious ways. So I decided to explore life coaching. And, that for me has been, I mean, obviously it's been up and down and topsy-turvy, and you're starting your own business and you have no idea what you're doing, even though you helped run a company for 16 years. And how do I get clients, and how do I do this, and what's my niche? And I didn't want to go back into corporate because I had a bad taste in my mouth at the time. So I dove into parenting because that's what I was into, and then relationships. And then it all kind of just made sense as like life transformation, no matter
Yeah.
what stage you're in, right? So that's what I was doing for a really long time. And now I just keep evolving and adding to, what I'm doing. Right now it's grief, but I can still talk about resilience and life transformation and parenting and all the things because I'm old and I have a lot of experience in that kind of stuff.
Well,
But
but I don't know about old, but you know what I love is, something that you said is I say I'm an addiction and mental health recovery coach, but I like you. I mean, I think that what I love about you is you're constantly looking and growing and working through your own stuff. And as a result, of course, you now have wisdom to then take on, more topics
sure.
around life in
Yep.
general. To your point, it is life. And I love again that you're dialing in a little bit more on grief, because I think it is an undereducated, especially in
Yeah.
America. Like,
Yeah.
here's the thing, around grief, it's so taboo. It's like, oh, I'm not going to touch that. Even if we just specifically talk about death, and I know, like you, that there's grief in all forms, but if we talk about death, it's like
Yeah.
you like your hands off. Oh, I know your mom died, but I'm not really going to touch
Yeah.
that because that might touch upon my feeling. No, I don't want to do that either. So I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, I tell my clients, I'm a student of life. I love education. I love learning things. Like if I'm not learning something, I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like I'm always in school because I'm definitely not doing that. But I'm reading articles. I'm, taking a quick master class. I'm doing a little training here and there. I'm following people who I think are doing really great things in the world and kind of reading up on them and what they're doing. And I think that just keeps your mind sharp and
Yes.
your wits about you. But I think it gives you an opportunity to just keep adding to your experience and adding to the education that you can help give to others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So, to the point, and you said you were doing parenting, and I think we had a wonderful conversation offline before. So I kind of want to pick it up because I
Yeah.
think it could really help somebody. We were talking about parenting, right? Your son's coming home from college. My daughter's now, dating
Mm.
and starting to drive and doing all the things. And even though we're coaches, the reality is that's hard stuff. Is
Yeah.
like figuring it out. And so something you mentioned that I absolutely love is your ability to have tough conversations,
Yeah.
because I think when we have those tough conversations, we're able to do the hard things, but we're able to do it very transparently with in the people that we're doing the hard things with.
Yeah.
Meaning, I have the hard conversations with my daughter about what it looks like to be in a relationship, what the implications are, but also the importance of having autonomy and making choices. You mentioned you kind of have those tough conversations too. Like, have you always had that lens? And how has that impacted your ability to parent and your relationship with your children?
Um, Such good questions. Yes, I think, I remember it's funny because sometimes I still do parenting workshops for my corporate clients, which is ironic, but like, there are new parents in corporate and they need to have these conversations. Um, I can remember that when I was pregnant with my oldest, who is now 18 and a half, my husband and I started having conversations about what kind of human do we want to put out into the world.
Mm.
And so many people don't, like you're so excited that you're having a baby. And each stage lasts about 27 seconds in the grand scheme of things,
That's so
that it's
true.
like you just want to focus on this stage at a time.
Yeah.
And while we did that, we were very conscious of the people that we wanted to, the types of people we wanted to raise,
Yeah.
right? So what kind of person do you want to put out into the universe? And it was, kind, compassionate, caring, thoughtful, smart. What is our responsibility in that?
Yeah.
And so from the time that our kids were literally born, we talked to them like they were our peers. Like
Yeah.
there was baby talk and there was all that stuff going on, but we would have very like real age appropriate conversations with them.
Yep.
We raised them in New York City for most of their lives until the last, 3.5 years. And so, my now 18-year-old was navigating the streets of New York as a middle schooler on his own. So like we needed to make sure that they knew what awareness was and what expectations were, and, just in a worldview, right?
Yep.
So and my husband also works for the news, so there's a lot of like real life conversations about what's going on in the world that happen
Yep.
in our home. So I think just by having those kinds of conversations with your children when they're little, and like talk to them like, I hate, and you might not agree with me on this, but maybe you will. I don't like when people like are carrying around their 2-year-olds and they're calling him their bestie. Like, you're my bestie. It's like, your 2-year-old is not your bestie, people.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't tell your child what you actually tell your bestie until
Yeah.
your child is your 20-something-year-old bestie and they can actually hear those words that they might
Yep.
not want to hear, right?
They
So
definitely don't.
they don't. They definitely, my son's like, I don't need to hear what your experience was, Mom.
Yep.
But I will share it with you if you, I don't need to. I really, right? But I think that you're doing your relationship with your child a disservice by putting that expectation on them,
Yeah,
because now you're
absolutely.
saying it to them at 2 years old, at 5 years old, at 10 years old, my mini, my bestie, my this. And it's like, now they feel like they don't have a choice and
And
that
that they
they
have to
feel
be
like they have to
caretaker.
tell you this. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a mistake that we have made as a society by doing those things. I've never done that because my mother used to always say to me, I am not your friend. I am your mother. I will
That's
be
what
your
I told
friend
my kids.
later.
And moreover, something I remember, and I never thought about it. I love that you and your husband had that insight to like think about, oh, what kind of kid do you want to have? My lens was, what kind of relationship do I want to have with my kids? Because I didn't have
Yeah.
one with my mother.
Yeah.
And so that was really important. But also I knew, and maybe you experienced this as well, I was a leader as well in corporate, and I was hiring and working with people who had no resiliency and
Yeah.
no like they had no skills. And I remember my kids being 2 and 3, and I'm like, they're going to learn that we're a cohesive
Yes.
community and we all pitch in, and not only that, they're going to know how to take care of themselves. So when I bring them, send them out into the world, they're going to be able to be resilient but also
Yeah.
meet their own needs.
100%. I mean, I use this analogy all the time when I'm talking about resilience in my talks. We are not born with that
No.
skill. It is a learned skill. And we literally learn it from the day we're born, right?
Yeah.
We learn that we have to wait if we're not being fed. We're going to cry until we get it, right? We have to learn, right? And so if you're a kid on a playground and you fall down, I'm the mom who's like, get up, dust yourself off, and go play. Unless you literally have a limb falling off your body. Like, I don't
Yep.
want to see you. Go play. We're here so you can have a good time. It's fine that you have a scraped knee. See you later. I am not the mom who will run over to the child and pick them up and say, oh my gosh, let's make it overkill to provide for this child. Like, this kid has to learn from a very young age how to pick themselves up and dust themselves off.
Yeah.
And I have one child who has never really experienced that in his life, my big one. And that has always, I can remember going to parent teacher conferences and they'd be like, I don't know why you're here. He's got straight A's and he's such a good kid and he's so this and he's charismatic and he participates and he's funny and he's great to his classmates and he's a lovely human. I will agree with that. But as his parent, I've always warned all of his teachers, he's never failed. And when he does, it's going to be big. And I want to make sure that he has everything he needs to fail successfully. I don't
Yeah.
know, but like to give him those tools. And it wasn't until he was in middle school and he had his first pop quiz and he got a 45 on the pop quiz and it was math. And he beat himself up so much that it was bedtime. And bedtime is like where we like expose all of our secrets. It's like our talking time at night.
Yeah.
And I was laying in bed with him and he was sobbing like uncontrollably. And I was like, what happened? It's school. I'm like, what happened at school? Did you get into a fight with somebody? Did somebody say something? Did you say something? What happened? And he was like, I got a 45 on a math test. And I was like, hold on, hold on. We had a pop quiz and I didn't know what it was and we haven't learned that stuff yet. And I was like, okay, this is the teacher just trying to gauge what you guys know, right? And if you don't know it, it's fine. You know
Yeah.
what? It's only a test.
Yeah.
We have tests every single day of our life. And I had to talk him off that ledge, but really get him to understand that welcome to life and welcome to you're going to get a 45 more often than you're going to get 100, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to be perfect and nobody expects that of you. And that kind of changed the narrative a little bit, but he still always was on that, trajectory for everything he touched kind of turned to gold. And I hope that continues for the rest of his life. But, he went away to college and he he's done very well, but college is hard and he is a civil engineering major and he is a freshman and he, was taking a very large workload in his first semester. And he called us after his first chemistry test and he was like, I bombed that test. I'm going to fail. And he just like, I'm going to quit college. And I was like, again,
Yep.
it's only a test. And then he called a week later and he was like, oh, by the way, everybody failed the test. So they graded on a curve. So I got an 80 and I don't know why I was even upset. Right. So,
Don't you love kids? My daughter does that all the
I
time. And I'm
can't.
like, this is crazy, kid. She's like, Mom, I don't think I did well. Mom, I got 95. I'm like, you know what? I
Go
don't even
away.
want to talk to you right
Go
now.
away. Right. So I think resilience is so important to teach
Yeah.
our people and for them to kind of figure it out. And so now I can look you in the eye and say, I am confident that my college freshman who has, over a 3.0 grade point average at school and has managed joining a fraternity and being involved and creating this really great network of friends. I can see his joy and his happiness when I
Yeah.
see him when he's away or when he comes home, that he has figured out how to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that, like, to me is I'm patting myself on the back. I'm patting my husband on the back. I'm patting him on the back because we've done our jobs, right?
Yeah.
I feel really good about that.
Well, it's
And
so
that's all you
funny.
can ask for.
It is. And it's so funny because I think, I look back at my children. I feel the same way. And I was a tough mom and all, like a lot of people would be like, what are you doing? I'd have my kids stack 2 or 3 pieces of wood at 3 and 4 years old. And it wasn't about the wood. It was about teaching them that we all pitch in, that we're all
Yeah.
responsible to achieve results, and that as a family unit, it's not just one person. But even now I look at how the girls show up and face things. And this is where my addiction recovery piece comes in. I look at the world where we're giving all these children all of these anti-anxiety medications, all of these, 504 plans and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I think that there is a place for that stuff. But I think if you're not allowing your kid to go through hard and recognizing that they have the capability to move through
Right.
hard, whatever that looks like, you're unintentionally doing a massive disservice, because then you put them out into the real world. And to your point, unlike your son, they've never had that conversation with mom about the fact that you're going to feel, and then they become suicidal or super
Yeah.
depressed because they don't realize that it is only a test, or it is
Right.
only a job, and they can go do something else. So I
Right.
think that's amazing.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, what's something that you would want to leave the audience with that you've learned over the course of your lifetime that has a profound effect on how you show up in the world and has helped guide you to becoming, the joyful, well living person that you are?
So I have a lot of like mantras and things that I kind of live by. Um, I did a TED talk on a mantra called Deep Faith Eliminates Fear.
Mm,
But there's one thing that I end pretty much most of my conversations with my clients or with just doing a talk, and it's three things. And a good friend of mine told me these three things that she taught to her boys when they were growing up. And I was pregnant with my, I think, first one when she told me these. She's like, I say this to my kids every day: be happy, make good choices, and I love you. And
yes.
I think that every single one of those things is something that we need to focus on every single day of our lives, right? Our happiness, it's your responsibility to find your joy. It's nobody else's job to make you happy.
Yes, that is so good. I can't tell you how many people I see and they're like, it's my birthday and my husband didn't remember. And I'm like, who cares? Like, I'm
Right,
sorry, you're
right,
responsible for planning your birthday. Like, is it
right.
nice if they do something cool? But
Now, if you had a considerate husband, he would know that your birthday was important to you and he would have gotten you a gift or
right,
something, right?
right.
But you have to
But
say,
still,
this is important to me, right?
yes, that's
That's
the
part of your
point.
happiness. Yes.
Yes,
So be
yes,
happy. That's one. Make good choices. And that, we all fall, we all stumble. We don't always make the best choices all the time. But if you have the awareness to be a responder rather than a reactor
yeah,
and really think about the choices that you're making in your life, you're going to be better than off than not, right? So make good choices. And then I love you. There's not enough love that happens in this world. I am a person who tells people on the street that I love them and I don't
yep,
even know them, right?
yep,
I will tell the person who got me the special balloon for my son's birthday that wasn't on the shelf that they went digging in the back for. Oh my God, I love you. You just saved a birthday party. And then they're
yep.
like, oh my God, I love you too. You're welcome, right? People need to hear I love you. We are missing the mark on the love in this world. And so those are my three things.
I just, I
And I
love
love
you.
you.
But like, it's so funny. I think when I think about the greatest thing that divides people is their fear of love. If
Yeah.
you I'm telling you, the fastest way to see somebody get uncomfortable is to tell them I love them. And I'm
Yeah.
talking about even like within my own
Yes, people you
family.
know. Mhm.
Yeah. It's like they immediately like zoop, because we have this fear like, okay, what is it they want? What is it they need?
Right.
What's in it? You know
Or
what I
it's
mean? And
reserved only
oh, yeah.
for, I can only, like, I remember growing up, like, we were a very Italian American family. Italian men don't say I love you from a certain generation. And I
Yeah,
remember my dad was never really an I love you person. And my mother was like, if I don't hear you say I love you to our kids, I'm leaving you. Like,
good.
I'm done. Like, tell them that you love them.
Yeah.
And it was hard. I'm sure it was hard for him, right?
Yeah.
It's the same for my in-laws. They are not very lovey people. And I understand, but it's like, tell your children you love them. Tell your friends you love them. Tell your
Yeah.
parents tell the people you love them.
It's a it's funny. I watched a show on a woman who was dying, and she said, as she was, she's like, lean into being uncomfortable with love. And so I
Oh yeah.
really took that. And so I tell people who I know are gonna be uncomfortable
Yeah.
by me saying those words, I love them anyway, because you never know the last time you see
You
them. And I'm like,
never
I'd
know.
rather be uncomfortable than not say those words. So this was just a gift to me, Krista,
Oh,
and to the
too.
audience. And I thank you so much for your time. I
You're
will
welcome.
absolutely put out your information. And if anybody out there watching this resonates, please reach out to Krista. She is warm,
Find me.
she's real, and she's